Welcome. Today we're going to talk about strategies for activating and assessing prior knowledge. These strategies are all in the math setting, but a lot of these can be used in many different subject areas. The examples you're going to see are math specific, but everything that we talk about can be done in both an in-person and a virtual environment. So before we get there though, this is a color zone check-in, which I use the poll feature in Zoom to have students or adults in the professional development session respond to. So I set up a poll ahead of time with the green zone, blue zone, yellow zone, and red zone, and had a check-in happen. I will be sharing a whole set of check-ins that you can use with students. This is a Google slide, so you can see if I sent it as a slide, I can have students respond a private message back to me. But it's great to get a check-in to see how everybody's feeling before you move into new learning. So the learning target for this session, I can develop strategies to activate and assess prior knowledge to increase student learning. To get there, we're going to engage in prior knowledge strategies, compare the strategies, and then select 2 strategies to incorporate into the classroom. So the first strategy we're going to look at is called which one doesn't belong. And this is a math specific example, but you can take this concept and apply it to any subject. Which one doesn't belong is a site, wodb.ca. You can see on the bottom left-hand side there. I personally would have you respond in the chat right now with which one of these doesn't belong. But I wouldn't have you push enter yet. And we can do this chat blast style. So I'd have all students working, determining which one of these doesn't belong, and coming up with a reason why. And then I would give a countdown and I would say, okay, ready in 3, 2, 1, hit enter. And that way the chat gets blown up with all these responses at once. Now, me as a student can feel more confident in responding because I didn't have to be the first one to answer, or I don't have to choose A because everybody else in the class chose A. I can feel confident in choosing D and having my reason because I already looked at it and I already wrote it down. Another way you can use this strategy is in Google Jamboard. You can set this up as the image in Jamboard. You can have students take a sticky note and they can drag it with their initials next to the one that they are saying doesn't belong. Now, the way this works as assessing prior knowledge and activating prior knowledge is the explanation piece. So it's what you do from their responses. You can call on students and say, okay, out of all the A group, I would like you to share your reasoning as to why you say A doesn't belong. You can say, all right, I see that Jessica is the only one that said B. Jessica, would you like to type in the chat or share your reasoning as to why you chose B? You can also group students together first. So based on their answer, if you want to group all of the A students together, you can group them in a breakout room and you can have them discuss their reasoning. Then they're more comfortable sharing to the whole class. You can also have them respond directly to you in a private message with their reasoning. This way you get to see vocabulary and conceptual understanding come out. You might see students say 3 halves because it's the only one that doesn't have or is larger than 1, I should say. You might even see students change all of these to decimals first. So it's not just the selection, but what happens in the conversations afterwards, where which one doesn't belong really helps you see where students are coming from and where to take them next. Now, I know this school year is very difficult. We have a lot of less time with our students than we typically would. And we know that their schooling last year was a little different. And so assessing and activating prior knowledge is crucial to getting students to master grade level standards without spending time reteaching what they missed last year. So if we can see the vocabulary and the understanding, or maybe some misconceptions from a problem like this, then we have a starting point of how to introduce them and bring them up to the grade level standard. So that's which one doesn't belong. And like I shared, we did it in a chat blast style, and you can also do it in Google Jamboard. A third way someone else shared to me was using an idea boards and having these up there where students just could add their initials to A, B, C, and D. Our second strategy is a brain dump. So a brain dump, typically in the classroom, I would put an image or a word up on the board, or a formula even, and ask students to tell me what they knew about this. So I didn't give them too much information. Maybe I just wrote the word slope on the board, and I just harvested information from the students. What was helpful about that is when they heard one person share or contribute something, then it would trigger some memories for students, and then more students wanted to share something. The only drawback to that is I maybe didn't hear from everybody what they actually remembered. So in a virtual setting, this can be hard. Not all students are live. We can't always gather what they're willing to share. So I created a Google Doc version of this. And the reason why I did a Google Doc is because all students can be live on it at the same time. And it's not like a Jamboard where it has limitations of what I can add to it. So in this brain dump, this image of a cylinder was in the middle and said, tell me everything you remember about the picture shown below. And you could see students inserted a table here and said, I can find the volume. I can find the surface area. I know the circumference and the area of the circle. I didn't tell them what to look for in this. Now I did give them some highlighted dimensions there. So they could have said, I know the radius is 3. I know the height is 12. This can be used and referred to now throughout the lesson or throughout the unit. We can add on to this, and it's contribution of all students together and everything they see. So as the teacher, it tells me this is what the students noticed first in the image. Maybe that's not what I would have noticed or what I would have thought of. I probably wouldn't have thought of the lateral surface area, but somebody put that on there, and so now I'm thinking, okay, they remember something about that. You may want to set up a table ahead of time and have students just select a section of the table to fill in to keep it more organized, because a Google Doc can be hard to have everybody writing on it at once. So that's a brain dump. And in the classroom, a lot of times I used an anchor chart or wrote on the smartboard and saved that image to bring it back up to show students. And like I said, you can always add in vocabulary, formulas. You can just give them a graph of something and ask them what they remember about that graph and the features of the graph. Our next strategy is a KWL chart. KWL chart has been around for a long time. I know it is more popular in the elementary level than it is in the secondary level. And it can be very hard to have students to fill this in and keep continuing to look at it throughout the unit unless you remember to refer to it. So what KWL chart stands for is what I want to know, what I want to learn, and what I have learned. This is intended to be filled out throughout a unit or a topic, not to be completed all at the beginning. What we want students filling in now is the what I know part. So if we give them a topic, you can see on the left-hand side here, it says inequalities. If I give them a topic and say, what do you know about this? Students can start filling in. I know an inequality means less than, greater than, it's not equal to, greater than or equal to. This helps us see what students remember about this. Maybe they don't remember how to solve them, and that's okay. What I want to learn can also be filled in at that time. This may be more difficult. You may have to model this for students to show them what it looks like to fill that in. Or maybe you can give them a problem and say, this is where we're going. This is our learning target for today. And then maybe it'll help them focus on what they want to learn. So you can create this chart, have students put it in their notebook or their folder. But in a virtual setting, we can't do that. So we are going to have students fill in the KWL chart in a Google Sheets. So I have my color-coded columns here. What I know, what I want to learn, what I have learned will be filled in after we've met this learning target. And you could see what I know is filled in. Solve it like an equation. I reverse the sign when I divide by a negative. Less than or greater than, not equal to, multiple solutions. This is a great way to see vocabulary. This is a great way to see what connections are students making from the previous grade level to what we're going to learn now. This is also a great time to bring in that vertical alignment and show them what a question looked like from 6th grade up to 7th grade and the differences in what they're going to be learning now. Our next strategy, as you saw on the screen, is a word sort. A word sort or a vocabulary sort can be vocab, it can be features, it can be characteristics, it can be images. And you can just give the set of cards to students and ask them to sort them however they see fit. Now, the great thing about that is you get to visually see connections students are making and the words they're putting together. You can do this in person with like cardstock papers if you want to reuse them. But virtually, I created an activity in Desmos to do this also. And what's awesome about Desmos, and I'm going to show you that right now, is that you on the teacher side can view what the students have done or where they have been and how they sorted them. So all you do is you created a card sort in Desmos. This is a template that's already there. I added a bunch of different linear and non-linear items to it. And I can see right here, my student on the left grouped a bunch of different cards together. Student in the middle hasn't really grouped too many together, but maybe they did rearrange them. So if I look at this one, they've actually linked these cards together of linear and nonlinear and put rate of change together with linear. Put X and Y intercepts together, but not in either one because they know that applies to every type of function. So I can see the thinking that went on in this student, and in Desmos, I could give feedback to that student. I can also look at overall for the class, the most common groups that were put together. I can look at this one and see that this person sorted on two sides. I have all my nonlinear features on one side and all my linear features on the other side. So I really like Desmos for this. Desmos has added features that you can sort by class now. So you can assign each class the separate activity and not all of your students' responses will be under one. So a card sort or a word sort is a great way of seeing the connections that students are making together and kind of any oddballs to them or any new vocabulary that they start asking me, like, what does this word mean? That probably means that they don't know that word. Our next strategy is called Write the Room. Write the Room is a great way to assess prior knowledge. You can hang posters or chart paper around your classroom. And on each one of those, you can write a word, a phrase, can include an image, and students walk around the room, kind of like a chalk talk, but not exactly. They just add on to that poster what they remember. So if my poster said triangle, I might walk up and write 3 sides. The next student might walk up and say, angles add to 180. Another student might say isosceles, equilateral, and right. A student can also put a check mark next to what somebody else wrote if they want to second that. If they want to add on an image, they can do that. So you just walk around the room adding on to the poster based on the word or phrase that's at the top. You can do this virtually too. So virtually, I turn this into a Google Jamboard. Now, what I love about Google Jamboard is students can be live collaborating together. My blue squares in the middle were the topics that were on the Chalk Talk poster, or were Write the Room poster that students kind of did a Chalk Talk on. So circumference was there, and one person added in an image. Another person wrote around the circle, perimeter of a circle, or that it applies to circles. And then they just scroll to the right and added their thoughts for area. Scroll to the right, added their thoughts for a circle, for a semicircle, and added an image. So you can write any words, any images, draw a diagram, second anything that another student had added to it. So this is called Write the Room. Virtually, I can just flip through and add on my thoughts to it and read what all my classmates had to say. I may want to add in my initials so that way I know who said what and who responded to what. Jamboard does not give you editing lists like Google Slides, so I can't see who added what to it. So that strategy was called Write the Room. Our next strategy for pre-assessment is called a brain web. And you may have heard of this, also called a concept map. I did create this one in Google Drawings, starting with the word slope and then showing my connections from there. When you do a brain web or when you do a concept map, you give students a topic and you ask them to write down any connections that they see. What's really cool is that you can see their thinking on paper and what they're connecting together. And same thing virtually. I did this in Google Drawings so that way I could use the line tool to show connections. You could also do this in a program called Lucid Chart, which is a chart maker, or you can give them a Google Doc or even like a Google Sheets and ask them to show their connections vertically. A brain web just really gives students the free ability to write whatever they connect to that word, whether it's really what the direction we want them to go in or not. The key here is to assess for any prior knowledge, any understandings from the grade level before moving up. We don't expect them to have our grade level mastered yet because they haven't learned it, right? But I can see what this student understands about slope, and now I can move that up to the next level. So that's called a brain web. This next strategy is another site that I love, similar to Which One Doesn't Belong. It's called samebutdifferentmath.com. It's a bunch of images like you see on the screen here. And you pose the question to the students, how are these images the same and how are they different? I like to separate those two questions. I think it can be hard to respond to both of those. We did this in a chat feature. So I just said, how are the images the same? And had everyone share in the chat one thing that they noticed that was the same about them. And once all responded and we had a conversation about that, then we moved on to how are they different. With a class of 30 students, that probably be a little overwhelming to get all those responses. So I probably would put students into breakout rooms and have them discuss this and then share out. You can also have students respond on a Jamboard like this. Just make 2 tables in a Jamboard and have them post sticky notes or write text under how they are the same box and how they are different box. What's cool about this is you can hear students either using correct vocabulary or using a word that we know is not the mathematical word we would like them to use for that. And so we know how we can correct that in the unit that we're about to go in. If students call them sides instead of, faces or edges, if we refer to the base as the bottom instead, we can make sure that in our practicing, we're using the correct vocabulary and moving students towards that. So this site is called Same But Different. There are images, it's not all geometry based, there are graphs, there are equations. You can easily take 2 things in your unit, put them on here and just ask them what connections do they see? How are these the same? How are they different? And the last strategy we're going to talk about is a pre-assessment. So there are district created pre-assessments for secondary math, 6 and up, in Aware. Those are the directions that you can find them under. They are using vertical alignment former STAR problems. So for example, for Algebra 1, this is an 8th grade STAR problem for the standard that directly relates to the solving equation standard. So these are set already in Aware. You can't edit them. Most of them are at most 4 to 5 questions, but those are the directions on how you can find them. You can also do a pre-assessment in your class. You can pick one of these problems. You can use it as a warm-up and use that as a pre-assessment. You can give it to them as an exit ticket so you're ready for the next class and you know where students are at. So those are all the strategies for activating prior knowledge and pre-assessment that you can use both virtually and in person. So the learning target was, I can develop strategies to activate and assess prior knowledge to increase student learning. We participated in strategies. Now's the time to take a minute and compare strategies. So if you look back at the last about 8 strategies that we just covered, I'm going to give you a minute or two to think about those strategies. As you're looking back through the strategies or reflecting on them, think about 2 strategies that you would be willing to incorporate into your classroom to try. And when you complete the Google form associated with this, I'm going to ask you to include those 2 strategies that you're willing to try and the reason why. Maybe you've done some of these already and just haven't thought about them in a prior knowledge way. So I really appreciate you joining me for this. I will be sharing a folder, or reach out to me for the folder of resources for the strategies that I shared with you in this. There is a table that you can complete that goes along with all the strategies that I showed you, that hyperlink directly to those, as well as the check-in slides that I referred to at the beginning. So don't forget to complete the Google form that is associated with this course. I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a great school year.